All right. What's up, Facebook world? Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. What's up, social media world? How about that? My name is Mike, and I am the education director for Southern Four Wheel Drive Association. Welcome to our Level 2 TechNet. If you missed our Level 1 TechNet last week, you can go back and look on the Southern Four Wheel Drive Association Facebook page, and it is posted on there and saved, so you can go back and watch it. And excuse me, we talked a little bit about modifying your rig, right? So leads us into our level 2 tonight, where we are going to talk about, now that your newly modified rig is ready to go and you're ready to hit the trail. We're going to cover on what you should do before you hit the trail, right? Because there's some things we want to think about. So as we are going through this, I'm kind of doing this on my own, so you'll see me looking over to my side. I'm looking at the computer in the chat there. If you guys could do me a favor, any questions that you have tonight as we are going through the stream, if you could preface it with a Q dash and then the question, that way as I scroll through, I can quickly and easily take a look and find those questions as I'm scrolling back through, and I don't have to look too hard to find them, right? Outside of that, I'm going to kind of be managing the stream, so you may see me look over to the side for just a minute. But couple of housekeeping things to kind of get through. So we had a board meeting last night. We all got together and discussed some of the future stuff that we're working on with Southern Four Wheel Drive Association. Got updates from our conservation director, Kevin. He talked about the grants that he's been applying for. We also, the vice president, Scott Pope, shared some of the stuff that he's been working on as well. Sarah, our business director, was sharing some of the new vendors and business members that are joining Southern, and where she is with getting stuff for raffle prizes for Trail Fest. So that was awesome to kind of get an update on all that stuff, and I'm kind of sharing what the plan is with the tech nets moving forward. So and Bo, he just listened to everybody. He didn't really do anything. Bo, I mean, he likes to listen, and then when it's his turn to talk, he talks forever. So isn't that right, Bo? Yeah. So we do have a new business member that jumped on board, Off-Road Communications LLC. All of us need radios in our rig, some type of radio form, and they are a business member. So they are a great one to reach out to if you need communications in your vehicle. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about Trail Fest. So as we are starting to get closer and closer to Trail Fest, guys, we need your help, right? We need your help to put Trail Fest out there, share it in all the groups, all the clubs, everybody, let everybody know about it. Unfortunately, because at the end of the day, Southern's a nonprofit and we're all volunteers on the board, we are doing our best as we can to share all the information about the event. But ultimately, you, our membership base, and our followers are who we rely on to help us with sharing that information. So if you go under the events tab, take a look at Trail Fest. If you are a member of a club, share it to your club. That way everybody's got an opportunity to come. We've got some great opportunities planned for this year. We even have access to 2 pieces of private properties with awesome trail systems on them. As far as I know, right, we have not 1, but 2 sets of BFG tires for the raffle, right? Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 tires per set. So that's 10 tires that BFG gave us for Trail Fest. Up to a 37-inch tire, you can get KO2s or KM3s. I would love some 37-inch KM3s to go on one of my rigs. So, but the only way to win is to come to Trail Fest, buy a raffle ticket, and jump in. Now, let me tell you what, I got a good feeling that chances are pretty good for you if you come to Trail Fest. So check that out. Let me double check here. make sure I've got all my notes down. But again, guys, make sure you're sharing Trail Fest with those. Even if you can't come, right? Make sure that that you are you are sharing that to all your friends and all your other off-road people. Again, you know, all the funds that we raise from Trail Fest and Dixie Run, that's what goes to support our grant programs, and goes to pay for things like the legal fees for the Daniel Boone Backcountry Byway. So we are in desperate need uh, of your guys' help with sharing that event. So awesome. All right, let's get into what we are going to talk about tonight. Your rig is freshly modified. You just picked it up from, you know, Weber Off Road, or you picked it up from Wheats Off Road, or Commonwealth 4x4, Asheville Vehicle Outfitters. Some of our great business members that have awesome shops, and we have many more. But those are just to name a few. But you're ready to take your rig out and hit the trails, right? But there's some things we should think about um, as far as making sure we're ready to go, making sure everything is correctly placed in our vehicle, and making sure that we are going to a legal place to off-road, right? So first off, one of the things that I recommend everybody does before they hit the trail system, excuse me, is I recommend that everyone goes to treadlightly.org and they take their online awareness little 101 course. It takes about 45 minutes, but it is a very informative course, and it does give you a good idea of some of the things out there that we need to think about when we're on the trail, right? It teaches us about the 5 principles for Tread Lightly, and everybody that's watching the stream right now knows the 5 principles, right? Yeah. Travel responsibly, respect the rights of others, educate yourself, avoid sensitive areas, and do your part. So it does a lot to educate us for that, but it also kind of opens our eyes to some of the things we should watch out for when we're out in the outdoors. Some of the things that if we see them happening, we can approach someone and we can educate them as to why those types of things shouldn't be happening, right? Why making bypasses or going around obstacles is a bad thing, those type of things. Or, you know, blaring your music on the trail system. Even though we're having a good time, we want to think about how we're impacting others. So take that online awareness course. The next step is we want to make sure that our vehicle is in peak mechanical performance, right? And I typically recommend for most people that they take it to a shop, because being able to throw a vehicle up on a lift and look at it, and a lot of these shops will offer uh, like a once over for kind of hitting the trails. And if you pick a good 4-wheel drive shop, like the ones I mentioned earlier, right? They know what to look for because they are 4-wheel drive people. They get out on the trails too. A lot of their mechanics get out on the trails too. And normally they have kind of a checklist to go through of things to check, like U joints and ball joints, tie rod ends, diff fluid, not the normal stuff that you would normally check. But if you want to do a good vehicle 360 by yourself, I'm going to give you a kind of a brief breakdown of how I do mine. I'm not going to go super in depth, but when I'm doing a vehicle 360, I got my little model right here, right? What I do is I start at the ground and I work my way up. That way I can keep everything kind of linear in my head. I check tires first, right? More than just air pressure. So what I'm looking for is number one, air pressure. But number two, what I'm looking for is any damage to the sidewall that might be apparent that could be a potential danger on the road. I'm looking for anything stuck in the tread face of the tire, like a nail or a screw, something along those lines. I'm looking for dry rot or cracking in the tire. Um, that way, if I see an issue, like say a nail in the tire, I can plug it now when it's nice and easy in the driveway, rather than getting on the muddy trail. And when I air down, it pops that nail out. And now I got to plug it in the mud. I don't like mud, so I don't want to do that. After I've done the tire, right, and I don't just check 4 tires, I go ahead and check my spare. But after I've checked the tire, I move to the wheel. What I'm doing is I'm torquing all of my lug nuts down, making sure they are torqued to spec. And if you are wondering about torque settings and why that's so important, one of our past tech nets, we actually have to speak with Clemson 4-Wheel Drive Center and SunX Tools on torque specs. and it was pretty informative. I even learned a lot. But we're checking torque specs on our lug nuts. We're also looking for any deformation or cracking in the wheel, something that may have happened from a past off-roading incident, or we're looking at the wheel weights and stuff like that, just kind of notating in our mind where they're at. If I'm going to be doing some really hard wheeling, I'll even take a little Sharpie or something and make a mark where the wheel weights are. That way I know if I lost one. I'm also going to check the valve stem, right? Just a good inspection. If it's a rubber valve stem, I'm going to wiggle it around a little bit. If it's a metal valve stem, I'm just going to make sure it's got a valve cap on it and that it's seated in there correctly. That way I don't have to worry about damage to a valve stem on the trail unless, I smack it against a rock. So I go around to all four wheels and tires and I go through that process. I check my spare too. And after I'm done with my tires, I go through the suspension. Now, I don't spend a ton of time on suspension, but I do check some basic things. I go ahead and put kind of hands on some of the shocks. I put hands on some of the suspension components just to make sure they're tight. One thing that you can do after, say, you just had a new suspension kit or something like that installed, you can get a paint pen, mark your bolts, right? So that you can tell if your bolts or something like that have backed out. Most of the time, a sticker came with the package of your suspension and it said after 500 miles, re-torque everything to the correct spec. And we all did that, right? Nod your head, yes, we all did that. So when we're looking at that kind of stuff, we want to check all the components and stuff to make sure it's still tight, firmly secured, and it's in good functional order. Along with being underneath the vehicle, kind of looking at suspension and components and stuff like that, I go ahead and just put hands on drive shafts, give them a wiggle to see if U-joints and stuff like that are still in good peak condition, mechanical performance. I also, if they are greasable, which not many are greasable anymore, but if they are greasable, I go ahead and grease them again just to make sure that they have good fresh grease in them. Then I'm checking steering components. Okay, things like ball joints and tie rod ends, all those steering components for play or anything like that. We all carry cell phones now, so a good way to check steering components or tie rod ends is put your cell phone underneath the vehicle recording and go wiggle your steering wheel back and forth. If you see a lot of movement of the steering rack or the tie rod, but the tie rod ends aren't moving kind of in unison, it's probably a chance there's some type of component in there worn out and you need to take a look at that. But I do check that kind of stuff just to make sure, again, that it works well. And, nothing really ruins a good wheeling trip like a ball joint or a tie rod or something like that going out, because it easily could have been prevented. So after I check steering components and stuff underneath the vehicle, what I typically do is I look on the ground underneath the vehicle. And what I'm looking for is any type of leaks or anything like that. And I can easily identify where it came from and what it is, whether it's coolant, diff oil, engine oil, brake fluid, anything like that, that I may need to figure out why it's leaking and how I can make a good repair. So, and if I have to, possibly carry a little extra fluid with me. So after I've done that, I move into the engine compartment of the vehicle. And this is where I do spend a pretty good amount of time, especially on newer vehicles, because there's a lot of stuff going on under there. But especially if it's a vehicle that I'm not familiar with, which if you just freshly got it modified, it's probably a newer vehicle to you too. What I look for underneath there is I'm doing a visual check of all the fluids, right? Brake fluid, coolant, engine oil, transmission fluid. If I can check it, excuse me. Excuse me. So all the different types of fluid, even windshield washer fluid, okay? Because I want to make sure that I can clean my windshield while I'm on the trail and spending a weekend wheeling. So I go through all those fluids. Some of those containers are kind of translucent, and they have a marking on the side that says max min. We don't necessarily want to open those, like brake fluid, for example. If we open a brake fluid container, we actually, or if we open the container under the hood, we're actually letting contaminants get in that brake fluid. So it's better to check it from the outside if possible, so we don't put contaminants in there. Realistically, they sort of recommend that your brake fluid should be flushed and replaced once or twice a year, depending on extreme duty or normal duty cycles with that type of stuff. But not all of us are doing that, right? I can't tell you how many times I bought a used vehicle and brake fluid looked like it's the same brake fluid from the early 1980s or something along those lines. So just keeping an eye on that and not opening those containers if we can get away from it. So once I've checked all the fluids, the next step is I go to my battery and I start looking at electrical. And I always start at the battery. I put hands on and I give my battery terminals a little wiggle to see if they're loose. I want to make sure they're nice and tight and make sure they're clean. I don't want to see a lot of that white fuzz on there, corrosion and stuff like that. I want a good solid connection. After I check my connectors, then I go to check to make sure I got a good solid battery tie down. That way, I know that my battery's not going to be vibrating off road. Things like bungee straps and ratchet straps and stuff like that, zip ties. I've even seen duct tape. That stuff doesn't cut it. You need a good, solid battery tie down to protect that battery in the vehicle. A loose battery is a fire hazard. So it is a very dangerous thing. Even bouncing around off road, it could hit against something and arc. So I make sure that that's good to go. Next step is I move to the fuse block under the hood and I make sure that I'm carrying the correct fuses in case I blow fuses that I can replace on that fuse block. So I just make sure I got a handful of each type of fuse, maybe even a couple of relays and stuff like that. That way I know I can replace those if something happens. I always kind of plan ahead about that kind of stuff. After I'm done there, the next step for me is I look at my serpentine belt, or if it's kind of the old school V belts, I'm looking at those belts to make sure that there's no dry rot or cracking in those belts or they don't look worn. If they do, I go ahead and replace them. After I replace them, then I take the old one and I put it in the vehicle as a spare, right? That way if something happens, because like if a serpentine belt goes, there's no great field fix for that, not one that really works well. So you're kind of looking at a bad day getting off the trails or having to source a serpentine belt in a bad situation. So that's the type of stuff that I kind of go through way ahead of time and I give a visual inspection of. I also, while the vehicle's not running, right, I will kind of put hands on some of the pulleys, like the idler pulleys and stuff like that, and give them a wiggle. Some of those factory pulleys or OEM pulleys are not sealed, some of the bearings. So if they get water and mud in them, they can start to kind of wear out. So I always like to put a hand on those and kind of check them out. Sometimes those can be kind of the source of a little leak or something along those lines. So make sure you are checking those out. Also under the hood, if you can access it, in a lot of newer vehicles, you can't necessarily do this. I go ahead and go from this right into checking like spark plugs and some of the connectors and stuff under the hood, making sure it's all together nice and tight. I may even, on older vehicles, I may even pull a spark plug, because if you look at a spark plug, it can tell you a lot about how well your vehicle's running. After I'm done with that, one of the last things that I check under the hood of the vehicle is my air filter. Just pull the air filter out, give it a visual inspection to see if it's good to go, or if it needs to be replaced. If I am going to a really dusty area like you already in the middle of summer, what I do is I carry an extra air filter with me, one to drive there with, one to wheel with, and another one to drive home. So that way I have a spare, right? Now, if you don't have access to a spare, what you can do is a pair of pantyhose. You can wrap it around that air filter while you're wheeling in those dusty conditions, and it'll act as a pre-filter for the air filter. That way we don't have to worry about ruining a perfectly good air filter. So after that, I'm kind of done under the hood of the vehicle. So I'll go ahead and close the hood of the vehicle and move on from there. But that is where I spend the majority of my time. The next step of what I'm looking at on the vehicle is how I'm packing my gear. And this is probably one of the most overlooked. And I'll tell you right now, I'm the world's worst at this. If you look at the inside of a vehicle that I'm wheeling, it looks like a bomb went off in there, because, you know, I'm always pulling stuff out and then throwing it back in. I got 2 boys, a wife, and 2 dogs with me. Stuff is everywhere. So what I'm doing, at least initially before I get on the trail, is I'm making sure that my gear is packed correctly. Yeah. So how do we want to pack gear? Well, for starters, there's some important items that we need to make sure they are accessible very quickly and easily, right? Some of them we think about, but some of them we don't. First off, we talked about modifying your vehicle, always carrying a fire extinguisher and always carrying a first aid kit. So those are two items that need to be something that you can grab right away, right? A fire extinguisher, you need to be able to get hands on it and use it within about a 45 seconds to a minute, or it's almost too late for those smaller fire extinguishers that we carry. So it needs to be easily accessible. Randy Rosa, our membership director, has a cool story about actually practicing with her fire extinguisher. Maybe one day we can kind of get her to share that. So same thing with your first aid kit. One of the coolest first aid kits I've seen out there, Outer Limits Supply. They actually make a hard case, Pelican case first aid kit, but they have a mount that goes outside your vehicle. So when you're on the trail, it's designed so if the vehicle rolls over, instead of getting crushed or getting underneath the vehicle, it actually ejects the mount so that you can grab it and put hands on it. I carry a backpack because when I get out of the vehicle and I'm walking, normally I go ahead and just throw that backpack on because it's got my water and stuff in there anyway. So I always have that first aid kit handy. I don't want to have to run to 20 vehicles back to the end of the trail ride and then run back to the front, right? The other items that I really recommend, and this is probably the most overlooked packing item that I see, is your recovery gear. It never fails. Somebody gets stuck in a trail ride and they're on a hill or they're off camber or they're in a precarious position where we really don't want to be climbing around the vehicle, but their recovery gear is underneath everything in the back and you can't get to it. And then their winch controller is packed underneath everything in the back. So what I do is my recovery gear is not one of the last things I pack, but I do make sure it's accessible throughout the packing procedure because I do want to keep it. Most of our recovery gears pretty heavy. I do want to keep it low slung in the vehicle because it is heavy. I don't want to be stacking it up real high where in a rollover or a vehicle accident it could go flying. So I keep it low, but I don't put a lot of stuff on top of it. And I take my winch controller. Okay, and I take my winch controller and I store it in my center console where I can easily grab it, pass it out the window to somebody who needs it, or if I need it, I can easily grab it and get a hold of it. That way, if I'm on a hill climb or something, I don't have to say, hey, yeah, crawl in the back and grab my winch controller or my tree strap and some of that stuff. So I make sure that stuff's accessible. Now, the rest of the gear that we have normally is kind of up to us how we want to pack, but there are some rule of thumbs we want to think of. So if we look at my little Jeep right here, one of my boys' little deadbolt Jeeps, kind of think about splitting the vehicle into fourths, right? Quadrants all the way around. Mainly we're packing in these back two quadrants, but how we're packing in those is important. Anything that's heavy, okay, we want to put as low slung in the vehicle as possible and keep it as low as possible. And we want to get it as close to the center of the vehicle as possible. A lot of people will pack their heavy stuff directly over the rear axle, which is okay, but the more we can move it forward, the more that weight will be split between the rear axle and front axle. When we do like overland trips and stuff like that, what we do is we actually fold down one of the seats in the back, and anything like water and really heavy stuff like our recovery gear, it all goes on the floorboard where that is. So it moves it closer to the center of the vehicle as much as possible. Anytime, like if we use some of the water as it starts to go down, we'll shift it out with something else that's heavier. But if we think about keeping it at the minimum above the rear axle or closer to the center of the vehicle, we'll be much better off, and the vehicle will be positioned better as far as weight distribution. Anytime that we move really heavy stuff behind the rear axle, it works as a lever and pushes down on that suspension, right? And we've already probably got a heavy duty rear bumper. We're carrying a big old spare tire back there. So that's where when you're driving down the road, you start to get some of that floaty feeling, okay? So all heavy stuff we keep in this bottom quadrant right here as far forward as we can. The next step is the lighter stuff. You know, if you're going camping or you're going to hang out at Falcon Expeditions, one of our awesome business members, you're going to go camp at their place in Western North Carolina. So you've got sleeping bags and stuff. That's the type of stuff we want to put higher up here that we don't necessarily have to worry about. It's not going to do damage. It's not going to hurt us or anything like that if it starts rolling around. And it's not something that's going to affect the rollover of the vehicle. Okay. So it's almost like putting a cushion on top of the heavier stuff that could hurt you. Clothes, all that good stuff. So that's the stuff we can put up higher. Or if we have room, we can pack behind the rear axle so stuff isn't rolling around as much as possible. So all that lighter stuff is what we can distribute in those areas. Now, anything that is in your vehicle, okay, even that lighter stuff, anything that is in your vehicle, especially off-road, needs to be secured and tied down. Excuse me. If we think about something like a fire extinguisher or a recovery bow shackle or D-ring, as you guys call them, snatch blocks, any of that stuff, in a rollover or even a rear end collision on the road, that stuff could go flying. It is heavy enough where it can cause a concussion or it could fracture a skull or break a bone. So making sure that all that stuff is tied down is super important. There was a study done way back that was based around the old flip style Motorola phones, that in a 35-mile-an-hour impact on the road, that phone, if it was on your front dashboard, if it flew into the back seat, was enough to cause a concussion on a person. So just some of the things we want to keep in mind, right? So we want to make sure that we get all of that stuff secured, and it's not just going to be bouncing around the rig. All right. So before I move on here, a couple of housekeeping items. Throwing up right there, Trail Fest, right? So for those of you that are just joining us, we're getting upwards of, looks like we got 22, 23, 26 people watching right now. So throwing up a QR code for Trail Fest, right? If you have not signed up yet, go sign up. You need to be at Trail Fest. It's going to be an awesome time. And I'll also throw up the link right there if you can't scan the QR code because you're watching us on your phone. Also, if you are watching the stream right now, as we're going through some of this stuff, if you have a question, preface your question, put a Q in front of it, then a dash, and then your question. That way, as I stream through the chat here, it's very easy for me to pull it up real quick to be able to answer that question. So, all right, let me go through and make sure we don't have any questions here. All right. Yeah, we got Wheats Off-Road watching. We got Weber Off-Road watching. Even Asheville Vehicle Outfitters. Wow, all the shops are watching tonight. Let's see. Yeah, Bo. Yeah, definitely huge thanks to BFG. Randy, I hate to tell you, but you are not going to win any BFG tires. I'm going to steal your raffle tickets. Bo, you most definitely can put 37s on a Toyota. Okay, you can. There's a way. It just takes a lot of cutting. Hey, Michael, Kentucky Crawlers, thanks for being here. Keith Weber talking about twerking in the chat. Get out of here. Looks like, Randy had a great comment. Randy, while we were talking about doing our vehicle 360 under the hood, she said you can use a flashlight to shine through the reservoir to see the levels better. That does work extremely well, especially for lighter colored fluids. So keeping that kind of stuff in mind. Let's see. Yeah, Brian, Kentucky Toyota Land Cruise Association. Awesome. Yeah, we got a question from Bo here. Let me throw that up. Bo asks if I do a pre-test of my winch. Not always, but you should. You should definitely check to make sure that you can free spool your winch out and that you power your winch in. I don't always do it before I go out on the trail because honestly, I use my winch weekly, sometimes even daily. So I know what kind of condition it's in. So it makes it a little easier on me. But it is a good idea. I can't tell. I can't tell you how many times on a trail ride I've seen somebody, we go to use their winch and it doesn't work. They've just had a shop install it that was not a Southern Four Wheel Drive Association member. Um, right, business director?
That's right.
Yeah, she just walked in the door. So, um, but I can't tell you how many times we've gone to use it, and the winch isn't even connected to the battery. So that's the kind of stuff that you want to look out for. Hey, Tim, riding for a soldier's child. Thanks for coming. But yeah, so definitely pre-test that winch and use it. I try to use mine at least once a month, um, if possible. And Southeast Overland Camping trips and events. This is just a little SCX 24 deadbolt that the boys like to play with. They're not old enough to drive yet, so I can't let them out driving my truck, but they can definitely drive this, right? All right. And the last thing I want to share before we jump back into instruction here is, guys, I can't tell you enough how important it is that you're getting out and you are supporting our business members, the shops that support us, the vendors that support us. Send them a message on Facebook. Any of the shops that I listed tonight, send them a message on Facebook and thank them for being a member. Thank them for their donations, and support them. Buy from them. BF Goodrich, send them a message on Facebook. Even if you don't run BFG tires, just send them a message on Facebook and tell them thank you. Warren, Rhino USA, Off-Road Communications, all these different companies, they are what really makes it possible for us to continue doing what we're doing. Because without their donations, even the attendance to Trail Fest and Dixie Run would not be enough. So we need the proceeds from that raffle. So make sure you're reaching out to them. All right. So moving on here. Yep. Norman Cole Jr. is repping AVO. He's here, and he is actually a tread trainer for Tread Lightly, and he is a Southern Four Wheel Drive Association member, and he is one of the best salesmen at Asheville Vehicle Outfitters. So let's move on. All right, you are ready to hit the trail. You've got all your gear stored. You know your vehicle is in good mechanical condition. Go ahead before even if you know where you're going, right? If you say, hey, I'm going to Windrock, or I'm going to the Daniel Boone Backcountry Byway, Beasley Knob, Uwharrie National Forest, even if you know where you're going, make sure that you have a good map already pre-downloaded, and it is an official map, not a buddy's track that he strapped a GPS to his dog and let it run around on the trails, right? Because sometimes I think that's what people do. Make sure that is a good quality map. There's a lot of mapping softwares out there now that you can use. You can use the BFG On Trail app, which is one of my favorite. I really like using that one because I know where most of the data came from, right? It came from CartoTrax, so we know it's good data. But just make sure that you have a good map of where you're going, not just, again, some of the random stuff out there. I tend to stay away from crowdsourced data because we don't know if it's correct. And unfortunately, some of these mapping softwares use crowdsourced data, and we have to be smart enough to understand where the actual trail is, especially when you're somewhere like Daniel Boone Backcountry Byway, where the trail is only 10 feet wide. If you are outside of that 10 feet wide, you are off trail, and chances are you're on private property. And this is a huge problem for them right now. So just making sure that that you have that official map and you're not using kind of secondhand maps and stuff like that. Some mapping software that you can use, like Gaia, is a pretty good one as well. Just stay away from kind of the crowdsourced data that's on there. And you can also purchase maps directly from CartoTrax. We've done several grant programs and had them go out and map areas like Uwharrie National Forest, like the Daniel Boone Backcountry Byway. So they have official maps. So once you know where you're going, or if you're looking for somewhere to go, some of these mapping softwares do have find trails near me type things, like the BFG On Trail app. You can actually show it your location or the location where you're going, and it can show you a trail that's close to there. But again, just make sure it's not someone that shared. That could be on somebody's private land, right? So then we're ready to head to the trail. Once we get to the trailhead and we're ready to hit the trail, go ahead and make sure, number one, you got a full tank of fuel. Don't be that guy on the trail where halfway through the trail you're like, oh, I'm on E. I need to find a gas station quick, or you're bumming gas off your buddy that has a couple of jerry cans. Make sure you enter the trail with a full tank of fuel, and your vehicle is set up ready to go. Air down your tires. I actually saw the coolest sticker today. I taught a private training, and the student had a sticker, and it said added up, and the ADD said air down dummy, and I loved it. I loved it because so many times I see people, they don't air down on the trails. So it's super important to air those tires down. The performance of your vehicle when it's aired down is huge, but also just from the environmental aspect of it, air those tires down even if it's for a short distance. Make sure that you are using four-wheel drive. Don't be that person who is like, I can do most of this trail in two-wheel drive. Go ahead and put your vehicle in four-wheel drive, the appropriate four-wheel drive, whether it's high range or low range. So just make sure that you're doing that. I got a question popping up here. It says, if you have a small oil leak, is it a fire hazard? It can be. It can be. Oil takes a little bit to get it started. Um, it's I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of vehicles out on the trail that run around with oil leaks. I mean, Land Rovers do it all the time. I'm joking, guys. I'm joking. Kind of. Jeeps do it all the time. We Toyotas, we all have oil leaks from time to time. It's not a huge fire hazard. It's more of kind of an environmental hazard. Just making sure that we're keeping that kind of topped up. If we do have a small oil leak, it's not a huge deal. Just making sure we get it taken care of kind of as soon as possible. Or if we're parked somewhere for a long time, throw like a piece of cardboard or something under it on the trail just to keep that kind of cleaned up. I have seen not oil necessarily as far as engine oil, but I have seen transmission oil or transmission fluid start a fire very quickly going against a hot exhaust. So that is definitely one that you would want to keep an eye on. What mapping software is suggested? Everybody's got their own preference. I use the BFG On Trail app a lot. I also use Gaia a lot if I'm laying out my own routes. And I'm fortunate, I've got several friends who are their degrees are in mapping and stuff like that. So I reach out to them. And I do use a lot of Cartotrax products. I tend to stay away from some of the ones that 100% rely on crowdsourcing data. That's all they do is share, a buddy's trail, because you don't necessarily know where that trail is, whether it's on public land or private land. But those are the two big ones that I use. Gaia mostly for planning if I'm laying out a route, because it has so many different layers, and the On Trail is a big one. Yes, yep, both exactly right. Cartotrax is a Southern Four-Wheel Drive Association business member and supporter, and they normally give us gift certificates for the raffle.
And they are at
Huh?
They are at Trappist.
The gift certificates? Yes, we have some gift certificates for Trail Fest this year. All right. So, yeah, Norman, most definitely make sure you have a full-size spare tire. That's super important. All right. So, we talked about making sure the tires are aired down, making sure you're in four-wheel drive, making sure you got a full tank of fuel, and some of the bare necessities just in case something does happen. Recovery goes later on in the evening, or the trail's taking longer than you thought. Make sure you got just some food and water in there, even if you're only going out for a couple of hours. It tends to keep people happier when they have a snack. When I tend to keep Sarah out on the trails and it gets to after 5 o'clock and she doesn't have a snack, she starts looking at me and looking kind of hungry. And I start looking like a Twinkie, or a Swiss cake roll. So I make sure I have snacks for her and the boys, and even your fur babies, right? We make sure we've got some extra stuff for our dogs when we're out there. Yes, Bo, she does get hangry. She does get hangry, and that really affects the entire trail ride. It goes downhill after that, guys. So, uh,
Seriously?
all right. So I make sure I have those snacks and all that type of stuff. All right. So we go out on the trail. We spend a day on the trail. Maybe everything goes smooth. Maybe everything doesn't. Whatever we do on the trail, there are some things after we come off the trail that we want to kind of make sure of. Number one, before we get back on the pavement, make sure you air your tires back up to the correct road pressure, right? Whatever that correct road pressure is. Normally, um, before I get back on the pavement, I do another vehicle 360 just to kind of go through the vehicle, double check it, make sure nothing's broken, suspension component wise. I haven't hit something too hard, something's not messed up. I haven't lost a wheel weight or lost a lug nut or something on the trail. I don't get super in depth with it, but I do kind of do just an overall kind of view of the vehicle. Once I get back on the road, I do not immediately jump on the road and jump right up to 55, 60, 70 miles an hour. I normally will get on the road and I'll slow roll it for a little ways and just gently increase my speed. That way, if something did happen to the vehicle, something came loose, something I couldn't catch visually, I catch it before I get up to speed, right? Normally, within 4 or 5 miles, I'm up to speed, but I do kind of take it slow just starting off because some things can come up. We got mud on the inside of our wheel. So our wheel's now off balance and we start getting a vibration or a loose steering component. So we've got some wobble in our steering, something along those lines. That way, I don't get up to speed and something fails and then I'm doing 55 or 60 down the interstate. So I do tend to keep it slow rolling for the first little bit. And I try as much as possible to travel in a group. That way, if something does happen, I don't have to make Sarah get out and replace the tire on the side of the road because I
Is
can't.
this pick on Sarah night?
It is
Okay.
because I don't necessarily know how to replace a tire. I rely on Sarah for that, right? All right. So guys, that is kind of the next step after you modified your vehicle, finding a good place to go wheel. And getting out and spending some time on the trail. Tim, yeah, poor Sarah. I know it. I know it. Um, but hopefully, guys, that shed some light on kind of pre-ride checklist, that type of thing. Our next live stream is going to be on recovery. We're going to talk about some recovery gear, and we're going to talk about some different things such as that.
Hi, everybody.
Sarah's coming in and blocking the live stream here. She's got on her Southern Four Wheel Drive hat. I think she stole that from somebody.
I didn't. They gave it to me, but you become a member and you can get one, a premium
Yeah.
member. Aren't they nice?
You're right, Norman. If Sarah would stop curbing the trailer at gas stations, we wouldn't have so many tires to change. Yes, Randy. Next episode will be pick on Stephen Knight. Yeah, Keith. It's Sarah. She is spicy. So um,
I am spicy. I just thought I'd say hey to everybody.
yeah, yeah. So Sarah is our business director for Southern, and I can promise you, she has been contacting everyone she can for stuff for the raffle. It has taken up a huge amount of time. I have to yell at her and be like, "Hey, it's time to go to bed." But guys, that's what we'll be talking about next time. We'll be getting into some recovery gear, choosing the right recovery gear for your vehicle, and some of the things that you should look for. And with every live stream or everything we do with Southern guys and gals, make sure you are sharing it. 100% make sure you are sharing it with everybody that you can think of. I don't care if they don't off road. I don't care if it's your dentist. Tell them about Southern, right? Tell them about Southern. Tell them about what we do. Share these live streams. Tag them in it. Tag our business members. And make sure you are letting everybody know about Southern and sharing these tech nets. Tell them about Trailfest. We need attendance, guys. We need attendance. We need it bad. We need you guys there supporting Southern, but also supporting those vendors and business members that have supported us. Um, that's right, Bo. Shared live stream. As I always say, guys, tell your mom, dad, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters. Tell your kids about it. Tell your dog's hairdresser about it. I don't care. Tell them all. But share it with everybody, guys. But thank you so much for tuning in and listening to me talk about this. Join us next Tuesday night. I believe I'll have to double check the schedule, but join us next Tuesday night at 8 p.m. and we will be talking about recovery gear. But thank you guys so much, and join us next time, guys. Bye.